Well, here, the number of people migrating to the UK has soared to an all-time high. The net figure, the difference between the number coming to Britain and those leaving, has shot up by 40% to 330,000, despite repeated government promises to cut it to tens of thousands. There's been a sharp rise in the number of people coming here from inside the EU, up 41%, while migration from outside Europe rose by a quarter. The number of people claiming asylum is up just 10% to 25,000, and less than half of them were actually granted it. That's a tiny fraction of the 800,000 asylum seekers Germany is expecting to arrive this year. Ministers said they were deeply disappointed by the figures, but many firms say they simply couldn't operate without foreign workers, as our business editor Siobhan Kennedy reports.
What is the best way to learn English, do we think? What is the best way? How do we learn? Conversation.
Polish sewers sit alongside Greek tailors in the basement of a Manchester textiles factory. They've stayed back unpaid to improve their language skills.
Nice to meet you, John.
Nice to meet you.
Okay.
So are these the future faces of British business?
Okay.
Perhaps not. The government sees the new record migration figures as a problem that needs to be fixed.
I think these stark figures are deeply disappointing. Clearly, when you look at these figures on EU migration and also the continued reliance of business on migration for employment, it underlines the challenge that we need to meet.
But today, business leaders fought back, saying the target to cut migration was bizarre and unachievable, and that migrant workers are needed to mend the skills gap and boost the economy. But that wasn't always the case. From the early 19th century to the late 1960s, Lancashire was the heart of the world's cotton industry. Thousands of local workers manned the mills and their many machines, looming, weaving, spinning, skills handed down from generation to generation, until one by one the factories closed as cotton was produced cheaper elsewhere. Now, after all these years, there's a renaissance in Britain's textiles industry. But the problem is, even though cotton is woven so deeply into the fabric of Lancashire, the skills needed to keep this industry moving have gone away. Incredibly, we are surrounded by mills, warehouses here across Lancashire.
Yeah.
You are the only one that has survived.
Yeah. It's amazing, isn't it?
Michael Stoll's factory in Manchester prides itself on being one of the only UK fashion companies to design and manufacture all of its clothing on British soil, and until recently with British workers.
From 2007 it was 100% British. By 2010 it was about 80% British. By 2012 it was about 60% British, and now it's about 20% British.
As British skilled workers ran dry, he decided to look further afield.
We started to think this is a good idea. There are skills around the world, they're not in England. Let's advertise abroad. And we actively ask the job centre now for those foreign skills.
Without them, he says his business wouldn't have survived.
I wouldn't have dreamt of saying this 5 years ago, but those foreign hands create the economy around the place. You can't be prejudiced. You have to, if you're in business, you have to give your job to the best person equipped for the job.
So now it's Ahmed who runs his factory floor, a tailor from Afghanistan, and workers like Toki from Pakistan, Ophelia from Bulgaria, 15 nationalities in total.
Well, it's not an easy job, but when you have experience, it makes it a bit easier, It's hard to get machines in England these days.
Why is that, do you think?
Because the people who used to do this job, they are getting a bit old, or they're getting retired, Younger generation, they don't bother about sitting on machines sewing things,
Across town in Bolton, Matt Tomkin faces an uphill battle trying to give local jobs to local workers. So the performance sportswear his young company sells is made in Lithuania.
And that's purely down to the skills, nothing else. It can't be a bad thing that a business can grow, a UK business can grow and export products and sell products around the world. It's not a bad thing that they're working with people from different parts of Europe.
Still, he's hopeful that one day he will manufacture his own goods at home.
If we could manufacture our goods in the UK at the moment, the premium we could charge, we wouldn't need to be working in and selling in the UK market. We could sell in a global market. China, you know, people think all our goods are manufactured over there. Well, they are, but the ones that are manufactured in the UK, or the UK-based brands, are absolutely flying off the shelves over in China.
The government is keen to push its British jobs for British workers mantra, but that's easier said than done. What's clear is that in sectors like this and others, there simply aren't enough skilled British people to do the jobs. And if it weren't for workers from outside the UK filling these factory floors, the likelihood is they'd be empty. Dot Dobbins is one of the last of the old guard. In this factory 30 years, but soon to retire. She says the only solution is training.
The foreigners, they get trained up in their country and they come over here and they're good at what they do. And that's what we need to learn. That's what we need to do.
There are a lot of people that say foreigners come here and take our jobs, etc., etc. You know the arguments.
Yes, there's a lot of that said. But if they've got the skills, who else is going to do it?
As she packs up to leave.
My name is Anastasia.
Anastasia.
Downstairs, the English lessons for the next generation get underway.
Who likes their job?
I love.
Yes, you love. I love my job. Why do you love your job?
Because I love sewing.
So for now, this factory is in safe hands. They're just not British ones.
Well, we did ask the Immigration Minister, James Brokenshire, onto the programme to talk about today's migration figures, but he wasn't available. I am joined now by the UKIP MEP, Stephen Wolfe, who's also their immigration spokesman, and from Manchester by James Eden. His business was featured in Siobhan's report, and Mr Eden has previously accompanied David Cameron on international trade delegations to the Far East. James Eden first. The Home Office Minister has criticised British business for its over-reliance on foreign workers. How important would you say migrants are to your business?
I mean, we are unashamedly British at Private White, and we have a phenomenal trade and an insatiable appetite for our goods. And the problem is we're struggling to grow because of a distinct lack of labour. As a result, migrant workers are absolutely integral for us now and for the future as we continue to grow.
And if the government was successful in reducing net migration to tens of thousands, what impact would that have on your company?
It would certainly have a detrimental impact in the short term, but medium and long term it'd be absolutely horrific because we just would not be able to grow. Our growth has been exponential over the past few years, and we see there is no downside to the amount of growth we can enjoy if we can attract the labour to create our British-made products.
Well, Stephen Wolfe, you heard it there, absolutely horrific if migration is reduced for that one businessman, but replicated across the country.
But James has a very valid point to raise about the issues of training, and we saw that in your film. And I know that personally from my own member of family, my aunt, who works in an industry that makes clothes. What we have failed to do in the UK for decades now is actually provide the resources to train our own people, whether it's in schools or training courses. We almost lost that in the 70s and the 80s. The same sort of things my uncle trained when he wanted to become a plumber and plaster. And what we're saying is that any part of a proper immigration process should ensure that we put that training process back in place.
OK, but in the absence of that, you accept that businesses badly need migrants to stay afloat, and so does the public sector.
Well, I think we've never said that we didn't need migrants into the country.
In large numbers, though?
Well, I'm not sure that I would agree in terms of the large numbers that we've got in terms because of the large scale that we've had. And you've seen in the figures today, we've got 630,000 people come here and 330,000 net. That's a city the size of York and Oxford combined. I think it's not within the wit of man to say that we've got the skills out there. It's just the ability to move them to businesses like James.
Well, James Eden, I think I'm right in saying that you do train some of your foreign workers in terms of speaking English, etc. Why not spend some of that money training local workers?
Well, we do. We invest, huge sums in British nationals. The problem is in our industry, for whatever reason, it's difficult to attract youngsters to come and join the textile industry. So there's a lack of an awareness about our trade and that there are jobs available for young British people that are looking to get paid well for a good day's work. So there's a slight marketing problem that we have in this industry, and there isn't such a stigma attached to clothing and textiles overseas.
But are migrants cheaper? Can you be frank with me?
No, not at all. No, they're not cheaper. We pay a fantastic wage. No one in my business works less than 38 hours, and they're all paid minimum rate and much more in many instances.
Stephen Wolf.
Well, I'm glad James does, and I'd love to come. I'm a Mancunian as well. I was born there. I'd love to come and see the factory if you give me the opportunity. But even Mark Carney, the Governor of the Bank of England, following ONS figures, has accepted that large-scale migration into this country has done two things. Firstly, it has reduced the wages across the board for low-skilled workers. And secondly, what we're now seeing is displacement of jobs of indigenous people who are brought up in this country hoping to get a job and can't.
Okay, but while you're
that's a significant part.
While you're upping the ante on this rhetoric, there are Syrians desperate to make a home, fleeing war. Mm-hmm. How many of those would you give a home to? How many would UKIP argue should have a home here in the UK?
Well, I think it's difficult to give in terms of the numbers. What I have said is that we should apply our international responsibilities under the UN conventions. But the point...
Are we doing that now?
No, I don't think...
1% we've...
No, I don't think we are. And I think we have argued, for example, in terms of Syrian Christians, and I make that distinctly because the Christians are suffering immensely in Syria, and there's nowhere else to go in terms of their...
So the Muslims can suffer, is what you're saying?
No, I'm not. I'm just saying that in terms of places, Muslims can go to other countries surrounding Syria, but there's less chance for them because they're being persecuted in those countries too.
But the implications of what you're saying are pretty awful, aren't they? That you say Christians are welcome, but not the Muslims.
No, I'm saying because of that particular group of people who actually have nowhere to go around their local areas. If the same was applying to everybody, you know, if the Muslims couldn't go into those countries, then we'd be applying the same principles. But what I want to get back to is the question in this country, because we've had a period of time where immigration has been so large, I think what you're finding in the country is fatigue. I think you're actually getting people saying that fatigued about those people coming here. And what I'm seeing is different to when I was looking at Live Aid and Feed the World when I was growing, where there was an openness. People are conflating asylum with just general work and legal migration. And I think unless we break the legal migration, people are not going to be tied and as open as we used to be.
Stephen Wolf.